They may not see it, but God still said it. Purpose doesn't require public validation. This episode dives into the reality that preparation often happens in the dark, unseen and uncelebrated. Just like Jesus, who spent 30 years preparing for a 3.5-year assignment, we too may find ourselves in seasons of intense preparation. And when it's time to step out, don't be surprised if the people closest to you, like a Peter, James, and John, fall asleep on your purpose. They love you, but they can't carry your calling because what God whispered to you wasn't meant for their ears. Hello, hello, hello. This is Linda, aka Lou, your host, and welcome to another episode of Say It Forward with Lou podcast. We are a community of healing, growth, creativity, and positivity. And we are also a podcast that speaks purpose, passion, and divine pivots out loud. So today's episode is one I hold close to my heart. It's personal, prophetic, and it's for women who's been asking God, why does it feel like no one sees me? The title, Slept On, but Still Chosen, when God calls you without a group chat. So let's go ahead and get into it. And we're going to sift through today's topic and chat. So make sure you have your cup of cozy, your journal, and that you're comfortable. So let's start with this. Have you ever felt a divine tension of being called, but not celebrated? Or being built in silence while everyone else seems to be seen, reposted, invited, applauded? That's where I was. And I want to talk to the woman who's been hidden, but never forgotten, overlooked, but never disqualified, misunderstood, but undeniably marked. Jesus himself spent 30 years in preparation for a ministry that lasted 3.5. So let that settle in your spirit for a bit, right? Because we live in a culture that claps for arrival, right? But heaven claps for alignment. And sometimes the alignment requires isolation. And I've walked through it. A marriage that ended in heartbreak, divorce, infertility, betrayal, infidelity, friendships that couldn't carry the weight of my growth and my becoming and unbecoming, right? And I thought those things were breaking me, but they were actually building me, right? And just like David in the field, anointed long before he was ever acknowledged by the palace, God was shaping something in me that didn't need a stage to be real. Every quiet year, every tear-soaked prayer, every silent sacrifice, every moment I stood in the background while someone else got the spotlight. None of it was wasted. And I want to tell somebody today, your silent season is not punishment, it's preparation. So let's talk about the Garden of Gethsemane. We're just coming not too long out of Resurrection Sunday. And if you know anything about the story, Jesus is on the verge of his greatest assignment, right? Headed to the cross. And he brings his closest friends, right? His disciples, Peter, James, and John. And his request was, stay awake with me, pray with me. But what do? They fall asleep. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, right? And it hit me. Sometimes it's the people closest to you who will sleep on you the hardest. They're not malicious. They're just not equipped for the moment you're stepping into. Not because they don't love you, not because they're against you, but because they're truly not equipped for the moment you're stepping into, right? Peter, James, and John had seen miracles, right? They had walked closely with Jesus, but they didn't feel the weight of the cross, and they didn't have the capacity to carry what Jesus was carrying, right? And it reminded me of a season that I was in, right on the edge of launching something that I felt was God-sized, that I felt was important, that I felt was big, right? And I had prayed and fasted and planned and obeyed, right? And I invited a few close friends into that space with me, hoping they would intercede, encourage, and maybe even just check in. And instead, crickets, silence, or a quick, that's cool. Like I had just told them I was going on a juice cleanse. I'm trying out this new detox, right? Which I'm known to do, right? But I remember thinking, wait, how can you be this close to me and still miss what's happening in me, right? But sometimes moments are Gethsemane moments, right? You'll look around and realize the people you thought would stay up with you won't. And it's not because they're fake, but because they're not called to carry your cross. And that's okay because Jesus still completed the assignment alone, but not abandoned. And so will you. So hear me when I say this. God didn't invite anyone else to the conversation when he called you. It wasn't a group chat. It wasn't a poll. It wasn't a FaceTime. It wasn't a Google Meet. It wasn't a Zoom. It wasn't a Slack conversation. It was a private download assigned with your name only. And here's what I've learned. There's a difference between being hidden and being forgotten. And I used to say I was shy, that I was introverted, that I preferred the background, right? But really, I was just afraid to take up space. And I remember when I was married to someone who knew how to command a room, right? How to command attention. While he stood in the spotlight, I kind of shrunk in the shadows, right? But in that space, God was working and I wasn't being ignored. I was actually being incubated of sorts, right? Because I know I'm not the only woman who's ever dimmed her own light, stood in the background, watered herself down, and called it being humble or introverted. I can't be the only one, right? Because the truth is, I wasn't always introverted. I was just conditioned to believe that small was safe, that quiet was acceptable, that background roles were where good girls stayed planted, right? And I know we've all heard the phrase, children should be seen and not heard. And while I understand the intent behind it, teaching respect and reverence, it can also unintentionally condition us to silence ourselves, right? It trains us, right? Especially as young girls, as young boys, as young people, to hold back our ideas, suppress our feelings, and our second guess the value of our voice. Because I was the one who'd walk into the classroom, right? Scan for a seat closest to the wall or in the back of the room, right? And the one who would volunteer to serve in some capacity just as long as I didn't have to hold the mic or be in the forefront, right? I was comfortable with that, right? I was on the team, but never wanted to be seen. I was the idea behind the production, right? And for a long time, that made sense. I told myself I was just being helpful, supportive, behind the scenes, doing God's work, right? Doing kingdom work, but from the shadows. But this season, it's been different because God's been calling me, right? Into the spotlight. And as uncomfortable as that is, and still is, I've learned something. There's a difference between being hidden and being forgotten. And I'll say that again. There's a difference between being hidden and being forgotten. God hides what he values. He conceals what he's cultivating. But eventually, what's been hidden gets revealed. And he made it clear, for me, it's time. And I'll never forget the prophetic word spoken over me this past fall. I was at my coaching cohort retreat back in November, minding my business, honestly, just trying to stay out the way, taking it all in, right? Enjoying the moment. And the prophetess that was speaking to us looked straight at me, came over to me and said, "You keep saying maybe it's her, maybe it's them, and maybe they're more ready. But God says, no, it's you. You're the one. You keep trying to pass the mic, but heaven, God has already handed it to you. And in that moment, I was so overwhelmed with emotion. I felt exposed. I felt seen. I felt shaken, right? But also chosen. So here's what I've learned. Where I used to say I was shy, that I was introverted, that I preferred the background, but really I was just afraid to take up space, afraid of what people would think, afraid that I'd be too much, afraid that I wasn't enough, right? But not anymore. Because when God says it's you. And there's no questioning God about that. It's you. And so just like Joseph in the pit, in the prison, before the palace, right? God had to allow a private development, a process before public promotion. Because if you get the platform before you're ready, it will expose what hasn't been healed or developed. And that leads me to Esther. So let's talk about Queen Esther. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. If there was ever a woman who embodied what it meant to be slept on but chosen, right? It was her. She didn't come from royalty. She was an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. No famous last name, right? No powerful connections, no platform, but ultimately she became chosen, right? And before she ever stepped into her assignment, she was hidden. Esther 2:12 tells us that she spent 12 months in preparation, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics, right? Before she ever even had one moment with the king. So let's let that settle in and really think about that. A full year of preparation for one defining encounter. She didn't know she was being positioned to save a nation. She was just obeying, trusting, and becoming. And ladies, that's what your season might feel like right now. You don't see the full picture. I know it. Sometimes I didn't see the full picture, right? Sometimes I still like, God, I don't see the full picture. You feel the press, right? You feel that press, the pruning, the stillness. You feel like you've been sitting in obscurity sometimes, like your voice doesn't matter, like the doors aren't opening, right? That what you're doing, you're just not seeing any progress. You don't really understand why you're in this particular season. But Esther teaches us this: before there's purpose, there's a process, right? And before there's promotion, there's often preparation in private. And I think about, like Queen Esther, I didn't see all the things God was preparing me for. I didn't know that the pain I endured in silence, the tears that I had cried behind closed doors, the years I spent hiding behind others' dreams were my myrrh and perfume moments, right? They were cleansing me and shaping me and positioning me. And if you ever felt that too, like you were hidden, silenced, sidelined, right? The story of Esther is your reminder that God hides those he plans to use greatly. Gosh, that makes me just smile when I really think about that, because if he exposed you too soon, they wouldn't see the queen in you, right? They'd still see the orphan, the overlooked one from the wrong family, the wrong background, the wrong resume, right? But when God calls you, he prepares you. And then he reveals you in power, just like he did for Esther, right? And Esther 4:14 says, when the threat came to annihilate her people, Mordecai sent word and said, who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. I love that scripture. It's one of my favorites, because what if all the times you've been overlooked, all the nights you cried, all the opportunities that passed you by, what if they weren't denials, but divine delays? What if your such a time as this moment is closer than you think? God didn't make you wait because you weren't ready. He made you wait because he was getting the world ready for you. You're not just healing, you're being crowned, right? You're not just waiting, You're being prepared. You're not just hidden. You're being protected until the fullness of your assignment can be revealed. And when it is, it won't just shift your life. It will impact the lives connected to your obedience. I'm going to say that again to let that really process with you. It won't just shift your life. It will impact the lives connected to your obedience. Because just like Esther, your yes has the power to save generations. You're being protected until the fullness of your assignment is revealed, right? Because Esther didn't ask to be chosen. She didn't chase a platform. She was tucked away, raised by her cousin Mordecai, and chosen to enter a palace she didn't ask to be in. For a crown she didn't even know she was qualified to wear, right? But her assignment wasn't just about beauty or favor. It was purpose disguised as position. She was placed strategically, hidden until the right moment to save an entire nation. Her yes, it saved generations, right? And I've seen this in my own life. There were seasons I didn't understand why doors were closing, why I felt hidden, why I felt like I was always the one called to serve but never seen. But now I realize I was being kept until the fullness of my calling could be activated, right? And even in this season, in this moment, stepping into new assignments, coaching, creating, speaking, podcasting, right? I'm watching how my yes is impacting others. Women are rediscovering their own voices, their purpose, their healing. Not because I'm perfect, because Lord knows I am far from being perfect, but because I finally stopped shrinking, because I finally said yes, right? So if it feels like God is hiding you right now, he might be, but it's not punishment. It's protection. It's preparation, because your yes is connected to someone else's breakthrough, right? When you really think about that, you're not just being positioned, you're being planted. And when you're ready to bloom, goodness, it won't just be beautiful. It will be generational. So to really sit and think about your yes, my yes, that there are women waiting on the other side of my yes, that there are women waiting on the other side of your yes. There are individuals waiting on the other side of your obedience, on the other side of you saying, I'm going to surrender and let God use me, because your obedience can impact someone else's life, right? So don't despise your silent season. Don't rush the process, because your oil, your perfume, your fragrance, it's still being refined. And when the time comes, you won't have to force the door open. You'll be summoned for such a time as this. So, because when heaven says it's your time, no man, no mistake, no delay, no pass can stop it. And listen, your soft voice is not a liability. Your silence is not a setback. Your season of smallness was a setup. So if there is something bubbling in your spirit, but you don't quite have the language for it yet, that's not anxiety. That's alignment. That stirring that you're feeling, that I don't know what's next, but I know this ain't it. That's heaven nudging you into your purpose. And like Queen Esther, who was positioned before she even knew why, or Moses, who didn't feel qualified to lead or to speak, or Jeremiah, who said, I'm too young, right? You're in good company. And guess what? You're not crazy. You're called. You're being called. So even if they don't clap, even if the door hasn't opened, even if the people closest to you don't get it, because this time you're moving for God. You're not moving for them. You're moving for God. And God didn't give them the vision, right? He didn't call them, right? God didn't give them the burden. He didn't call a conference call. He didn't call a group chat. He didn't call a FaceTime, Zoom, Google Meets conference call, right? He called you. So this week, here's what I want you to do. Walk in strategy, move in obedience, speak with clarity, Show up in faith because you were built in silence, but you're about to be revealed in power. And when that door opens, because it's going to open, when your name is called, when your voice echoes in rooms you used to dream about, you'll know it wasn't about who reposted you and it wasn't about who liked it, right? It was always about who sent you. So before we end this episode, I just want to close us out in a quick prayer. Lord, thank you for the hidden seasons. Thank you that even when others didn't see us, you did. Help us to trust the process, lean into your timing, and walk boldly into what you've called us to. And let us be reminded that applause is optional, but your assignment is not. So we say yes, even now, even unseen. In Jesus' mighty, matchless, and magnificent name I pray. Amen. So I want you to say this declaration with me. I was built in silence. I am called by God. I will not shrink. I will not apologize. Even if they sleep on me, I was still chosen. So your calling, it doesn't need confirmation from a crowd. Your yes is more powerful than their applause. So keep walking, keep pushing, keep becoming, right? You're not behind. You're right on time. God's about to make public what he's been perfecting in private. So if this episode blessed you, do me a favor, like it, share it, leave a review, text it to your sister friend who needs the reminder or someone who needs the inspiration that she's still chosen. And yes, share this one in the group chat. Pun intended, right? And if you know you're called but feel stuck on the how, click the link in the show notes and book a free Chit Chat Clarity call with me and discover if we can partner in a coaching relationship to take your journey further and explore what some of your goals are and put an action plan for you to be able to meet them, right? Because God is calling you forward and you don't have to figure it out alone. So as always, stay tuned, stay a while, and let's continue to say it forward together. I look forward to chatting with you next time. Take care.